On this episode of the Athletic Potential Podcast, we'll be discussing a novel soccer conditioning program that we have just implemented, and we'll introduce John, the student. Welcome to the Athletic Potential Podcast, your place to come and get answers to your athletic development questions. We cover a range of topics, all related to helping you to achieve your athletic goals so that you can experience and enjoy the athletic career that you deserve. I am your host, Dr. Mike Matthews. Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Athletic Potential Podcast. This is a big-time podcast because we have the one and the only John Goff on today. He's a student from the University of Utah. He's been with me for the last 12 weeks. This is his last week with me, and then hopefully he'll pass his internship, which is still up in the air, John. And then also he has to pass his boards, but then he's a full-blown PT. So anyways, John's going to join us today, and we're going to talk over something that we've been just implementing just barely. And the reason I wanted to bring it on is because John's been pretty instrumental in making sure that this is going to happen. And we are going to cover a case. We have a female soccer athlete who shouldn't say just, but had an ACL reconstruction, and she's almost at 9 months. She's well ahead of the curve. We're actually talking about maybe returning to sport early. Her doctor's really happy with where she's at. And one of the things on her one of the last sessions that when she met with us was that she was a little concerned with conditioning. And so John and I set out to try and figure out maybe how we want her to condition. And so rather just doing what you conditionally or what you would normally see is, like your intervals, your, sideline sprints, your beep drills or whatever they're called, those kind of things. We wanted to get a little bit more granular with it and try to really get more evidence-based. And this is something that I've done with a few other sports, predominantly baseball, softball, and then also hockey to a small extent. And the idea was that we hoped that there was research out there that would give us an idea of how the typical soccer athlete spends an entire match either running and at what speeds or whatever it is. And so I tasked John to go out and find something, and maybe we could pull some data from and maybe make some good informed decisions. And so I wanted to talk about it today. So we're going to bring John on. So first, John, introduce yourself, say where you're from, your favorite hobbies, and maybe something that not even your mom knows about you.
All right. Well, what's up, everybody? My name is John, as Mike already alluded to. From Grand Junction, Colorado, which is not too far from where we're at here in Utah, about 4 hours away. So I grew up there and then came over to Salt Lake City for physical therapy school at the University of Utah, same place that Mike got his DPT at. So, it's been a great experience over there. This is my final rotation of physical therapy school, my final week of physical therapy school. So, and it's been an amazing rotation so far. I've had one other outpatient orthopedic rotation, but this was the first sports focused rotation that I've had. And I feel like I've found the place that I want to practice in as a physical therapist. I've learned immense amounts, and I have a passion for working in this setting, and I haven't felt like that in any other of my rotations. So it's been a great experience. But yeah, so that's a little bit about me, where I'm from. Sorry, what was the rest of the questions?
What's one thing your mom doesn't even know about you?
Oh man, my mom doesn't know about me. Probably how much that I play FIFA. I love FIFA, the on Xbox. My friends can attest to that. That's a good way that I like to unwind after a long day of patient care or just learning throughout physical therapy school. So, but yeah, I've actually used. I think I told you about this, getting into this rotation and how much you work with throwing athletes in the sport of baseball, that I didn't know a whole lot about baseball and throwing sports. So I started playing a little bit of MLB The Show on Xbox, and to try to pick up a little bit of the terminology and get more familiar with the game. So interesting way to learn more about the sport, but it worked. I've learned an immense amount about soccer just from playing FIFA, so I thought I could carry that over into baseball. But yeah, probably one thing that she doesn't know about me right there.
It's a hidden gem. So I actually learned almost everything I know about hockey by playing a really old video game. My brother played hockey and I had no clue what anything was. And so I started playing this. I mean, I'll date myself, but I don't remember the game console it was, but I was playing hockey and that's the only way I ever figured out what icing was. It was the only way I figured out the rules. But yeah, interesting way to learn a game. Just go play a video game. I mean,
Yeah.
that sounds like a great way to learn it, but anyways, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
So John, we obviously you heard the intro there. We've got our soccer athlete we've been working with, and she's done immensely well. She's gotten strength back. Yeah, there's a few things we're still working on, hopefully getting her in return. But we talked about this conditioning program that we wanted to develop and build, and we wanted to try and make it more evidence based and in more towards soccer rather than just having her out and go run garbage miles and just jog for 30 to 40 minutes a day or run interval sprints or something like that. We really wanted to get down to a little bit more detail and see if we could mimic a little bit more of the soccer. So first of all, maybe introduce the study a little bit of what you found, what the study was trying to look at, and then we'll go from there in regards to maybe how we've used it in developing our conditioning program for our soccer athlete.
Yeah. So when looking to come up with this program and diving into the literature, obviously PubMed was the go-to as usual. So went to there and I kind of I think I searched like collegiate women's soccer, like metrics or distance or speed were kind of like my keywords that I searched up. And this was one of the first. Well, I don't know if it was the first one to come up, but one that seemed more promising than others. It was titled "The Demands of a Women's College Soccer Season." Basically, I believe it was done out of a Division II college in East Tennessee State University. That's what it looks like. But basically, what they did is um, the people of the study they put GPS trackers on the athletes for literally a whole season, like both practice and games, and they got just a ton of data, throughout the season just to kind of get an idea of the overall workload that athletes, women collegiate soccer players, kind of experience throughout the season. So that's just a general overview a bit of the study, but when diving into it, main kind of pieces that I was looking for were really like total distance. How far were these athletes traveling in a game? And we can get into the specifics here in a little bit, but that was one of the main things I was looking at. Also, a little bit more specificity to the position because the athlete that we're working with, I believe she's a striker or a 9 position to be technical with it. But and I liked how this study kind of broke up metrics per position, so it got a little bit specific with, or more specific with how far each position was traveling and the different speed zones that they were traveling in. Which the speed zones itself was another good aspect of this study. It didn't just have like an average speed, but it kind of broke it down even further into like amount of distance traveled in. They used kilometers, and I transferred into miles per hour, but like 0 to 3 miles per hour, and then 3 to 6 miles per hour, and just different speed zones. So you could, just different aspects that we could get more specific with this conditioning program we were developing. So, but yeah, it was pretty crazy how much data they gathered and the consistency of the study to be able to have the athletes wear a GPS tracker for every practice and game throughout the season. But we're benefiting from the data that they collected. So props to them.
So yeah, looking at the data, there's some interesting things. So a lot of people, I've talked to a few, excuse me, different soccer athletes and those type of things that they say, well, okay, well, how far does a typical soccer player run or is moving in a typical match? And so they've got data on that. Now, granted, it's in kilometers, so for those that want to, you can convert it later, but I mean, I
Yep.
probably can convert it really fast right now, but so John, do you have that data in front of you? Is that table? And it talks about total distance in kilometers, and
Mhm.
and let's go over like okay, because I know like a few listeners are gonna be like, okay, well, how far did these players actually run in a full game?
Absolutely. So, just looking at the results, or not the discussion and the results of the study, when looking at the total distance that was traveled, they found that there was a total distance or an average total distance of 5.48 kilometers, which I then converted over into miles because we're in the United States and that's how we work over here. So, and it was 8.6 miles was the average, I believe, if you convert 5.48 kilometers into miles. Well, that would be way off. Just kidding. That's
I was gonna say
another.
that's not what my calculator's giving me, John.
That's another number I had jotted down. Is actually 3.4 miles. That makes a little more sense.
That's what
8.6
my
miles would
calculator
be.
says.
Thanks for backing me up with that real quick, Mike.
Yeah. So just around
But
three and a
yeah,
half miles ran or moved in a typical soccer match. And that's during game time. So just to be very clear, that's during game time. There's warm up time as well, which they increase their distance as well. So they're running a lot in game days. So, but what else did you find in regards to like just total distance? Anything else interesting there?
yeah. So I mean, I could get into the speed zones, which I thought was interesting.
Let's get into that in just one second because that really determined really how we started developing this conditioning program. So one of the things you could look at in regards to conditioning programs is you go, okay, well, in a typical, timed match, you're going to run anywhere from, 3.4 miles. And so a lot of people would say like, oh, well, you got to go put in 3.4 miles of work to get this thing done. Now you could do that. But the problem is then, anybody who's watched soccer or knows anything about soccer is that 3.4 miles run all at one time at a normal, like a steady state pace is not how the game is played. And so what we wanted to do is not only take distance and maybe use distance as a measure to try and make sure that we're dosing this correctly for our athlete, but we wanted to take a percent of speeds along with this. And what that's going to allow us to do is essentially target certain metabolic demands or certain energy demands in regards to cardiovascular training. And that's what led into this. And I think John nailed it with this study is this is exactly the information we needed to develop this. So John, go ahead and jump into those speed zones. So, and talk about how the research article pulled those apart. And maybe we'll go into a little bit of how we made some key decisions on that of how to implement this program.
Yeah. So not only did they, thankfully for this study, not only did they just record total distance, but they due to the GPS trackers they were wearing, they could get even more specific and see how much of that total distance they spent in different speed zones. The way they kind of defined these speed zones in this study, speed zone one was, I believe, I had it written down point like 0.62 to 3 miles per hour, which is pretty low. And they had zone one through zone six. So zone two, 3.1 miles to 6.2 miles per hour.
So real quick, so
Basically,
3 miles an hour is on a treadmill. So a lot of people just get an understanding. 3 miles an hour on a treadmill is actually walking speed for a normal adult. It's anything a little bit higher into that 4 miles an hour range. You get that awkward walk fast / I kind of want to jog type speed. So just give some context. Sorry, John, go ahead.
yeah, no, you're good. Thanks for that added context. I don't know if you've tried it yet, but I've tried the protocol myself, and it was definitely kind of that awkward, um, not jogging, not walking, but right in between. So yeah, that's zone one, 0.62 to 3 miles per hour, which is pretty much a walking pace. Zone two is 3 miles per hour to roughly 6 miles per hour. So then you're starting to get into like a slow jog. Zone three, 6 miles an hour to 9.3 miles per hour. So you're getting to a pretty brisk jog. It's not nearly a full on sprint, but 9 miles per hour, you're starting to breathe decently. Zone four, we're looking at about 9 miles an hour to 12 miles an hour. And once you're hiking up to 12 miles an hour, then you're getting close to a sprint. Zone five was 12 to 15 miles an hour. And that's like dang near max effort if you're sprinting close to 15 miles per hour. And then they had a zone six, which was anything over 15 miles an hour, which is like absolutely 1% all out effort. You're sprinting to go try to score a goal or something. But yeah, so they were able to look at the distances that that are, I guess, the average distances that they spent in those different time zones. And then we were able to extrapolate from that kind of how much of the conditioning program that we should apply, like how long should she spend in time zone one or time zone two or time zone three at those different speeds to make it really specific and prepare her for the demands of a game. These were all, so they did these for practice and game too, I should clarify, and I looked at the viewpoint as just the game numbers, because that's how we want to prepare her to be able to work at. We're looking at optimal performance in the game, and we want to be able to get her to that level. So yeah, we kind of took those numbers and then divvied it out from there, which I can keep on alluding to, or if you want me to
No,
go
so
somewhere else.
an interesting part of the article, and I was looking through it just barely, and I was curious of how many of the athletes actually achieved above 15 miles per hour in a sprint. I'm not sure they had anything in there in regards to who was achieving that, but I wonder if all the players on the field are actually achieving that. So it goes to the context of, depending on your position, there's likely other, certain players on the field that are going to reach max velocity sprinting, and there's others are not. And so it, at the level of soccer that our athlete is playing, we basically are going to take the most strenuous that someone on the field is going to go, and that's again that 15 miles an hour or above, and we're going to have them work at that level because realistically that's where we want them to. And so I was just looking through this, the speed zones based on the midfielders, forwards, and I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
There's only a few points where we're seeing speed zone 6.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, it's
not
pretty
very
small.
much.
Yeah, but that's okay. So, but it's still good information nonetheless. So if you look at traditional conditioning programs for soccer players, they're going to be interval training where they're going to sprint for a certain amount of time, rest for a certain amount of time, then sprint. Now, one of the things that I think we could do better, which is the reason why we went after this kind of different type of conditioning program, is that in those conditioning programs, they're basically sprinting either at 80% maximum or all out sprinting during these interval training programs. Now, there's different things you want to work on. They're trying to improve VO2 max and in their capabilities of being able to sprint at high intensities more often. Then maybe you would do those sprints more often. But in this case, we're trying to get our player here back to baseline. And so I think one of the reasons we kind of went towards this training program or this conditioning program based on this research is that it gave us an idea of, hey, look, this is the Division II collegiate level data. We're talking about someone who's still in high school or playing competitive soccer at a teenage level. So this is already above and beyond of what she's probably capable of doing. And so we're already asking more of her than would typically be expected. But this is also somebody who has aspirations of playing high level soccer into college. And so we're talking D1 aspiration levels and potential chances that she would actually get that opportunity. So that'd be something to think about as a lot of people talk about conditioning programs. They go out and they jog and then they sprint a couple times and maybe do a couple other things. But let's go ahead and dive into the actual program a little bit. And then, John, just give me your reasoning in regards to why we broke it up or why you broke it up the way you did. And then, we'll go from there after that.
Cool. Yeah, let me pull that up real quick on my iPad. But yes, here it is. So it took a couple trials for sure when trying to get it, and ultimately it came down to me performing it myself to really make sure that it was something that was applicable and make sense and was easy for her to do. So
easy in the sense of
first,
logistics, yeah. So
yeah,
we'll get into that. But when you say easy, were you talking like logistics wise, or are you talking like intensity wise?
logistics wise, because
Perfect.
it's not easy. I did it myself, as I said, but yeah, and we don't. That's not the aim. Obviously, is to we want to make it as accurate of a representation of what a game would be like for her. And if we're making it easy, then that's just going to be a poor job on our part in preparing her and getting back to play. So definitely logistics wise, make it simple yet effective in targeting the areas that we want to target. So the first draft there was lots of transitions. So there's 6 total speed zones, and there's a variety of different time spent in each speed zone. So I really initially just kind of looked at first the percentage that they were spending in each speed zone. So I looked at the total distance that was traveled, which we said was 3.4 miles total in a game. And then the data, they kind of had distances in each speed zone. So I believe I took the average amount of time that they spent in that speed zone and then divided that out of the total distance. So if they spent 1.4 miles in speed zone number 1, and I divided 1.4 out of the 3.4 total miles traveled in the speed zone, and that gave me like a general percentage that they were spending in each speed zone. So that first speed zone ended up being about 31% of the time they were from 0 to 3 miles per hour.
So a third of the
33%.
game, they're moving
Yeah.
at either a snail's pace or a very awkward walk jog pattern.
Yeah, it's weird looking at the numbers, but it kind of makes sense, you know. It's like if you're watching a soccer game, a lot of times if you don't have the ball near you, and it's obviously different per position, but you're just kind of like you got to guard your area of the field or stay, you know, hold your position on the field, and you can't just go sprinting directly where everybody's at. So you're kind of just watching until you know you got to be quick and explosive when the ball gets to you. So yeah, speed zone two was that 3 miles to 6 miles an hour, and that was about 33% of the time. Also a good chunk. So second, third is from, you know, like right at a slow, decent jog. Then we get up to zone three, which is that 6 to 9 miles an hour, where that was about 24% of the time. So it's starting to decrease here as we go up. Zone four, 9 miles to 12 miles an hour was about 8% of the time. But that's a pretty, you know, we're getting pretty demanding with the intensity of the sprint that we're working at. Zone five was at 12 to 15 miles an hour, and that was only about 2% of the time. And then zone six, like completely 100% max effort, was 0.3% of the time. But that's like that one stretch where you just got to give it all out to, you know, for a game changing play or something. But, anyways, from those, now that I had a percentage for how much time we were spending in each speed zone, I had an idea and basically a value that I could apply to just a training time for the conditioning program. So we ended up deciding like a 20-minute conditioning program seemed logistically like doable for a total duration for a high school athlete that's got other demands in life. Obviously, a big part of it is preparing for soccer, but she has other aspects of training that she has to work on, like specifics to return from her ACL injury and strength training and other stuff. So we chose 20 minutes for our total duration of the exercise. And then I just applied those percentages of each speed zone to take up chunks of that 20% or that 20-minute time frame. So 31% for the zone one ended up being like 6 minutes out of the 20 minutes. We would be targeting that area of like roughly 3 miles an hour of intensity or speed running. 33% of the time ended up being 7 minutes that we were in 3 to 6 miles per hour. 5 minutes out of the 20 minutes was 6 to 9 miles an hour. 2 minutes was the nine. 2 minutes out of the 20 minutes was 9 miles to 12 miles an hour, and so on up until the top speed zone, where it was only like 30 seconds out of that 20-minute training period was, you know, max intent at roughly 15 miles an hour. Which doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're working at that, you know, total max intent, it's proportionate to what we see in the data, which was the big thing that we wanted to give her in a conditioning program. So that's the basics on how I took, you know, total distance and then how much distance traveled in each speed zone, found percentages, and then applied that to a 20-minute conditioning time frame.
Yeah. So, brief overview or just quick recap. So, for those listening, 6 minutes spent at a 0 to 3 mile an hour pace. That's either standing or just barely walking on the treadmill, or just walking in general. 7 minutes spent at a light to moderate jog, really. So 6 miles an hour at the maximum there. 5 minutes spent at that kind of heavier jog. So 6 to 9, kind of the nine is, you know, for a lot of people, nine is a decent sprint. Depending on, you know, conditioning level and maturity level, and then 2 minutes sprint at a 2 minutes spent at a sprint, and then 1 minute spent at a pretty dang hard and heavy sprint, and then 30 seconds just completely all out. Now, the thing is that what we didn't do, and John will allude to this and how he broke it up, is a lot of people like, okay, cool. So we need to go out and we need to do a very light walk for 6 minutes. Then we need to jog for 7 minutes. Then we need to kind of sprint for about 5 minutes. And we need to sprint heavy for 2 minutes. And we sprint really heavy for another minute. And then just absolutely berserk for 30 seconds. And that would be one way you could do this protocol. But in our case, we decided against that and wanted to make it a little bit more, you know, game like. And so, John, go ahead and explain how you decided to break up those time intervals. So rather than doing 6 straight minutes of that kind of walk, almost not even moving, explain how you broke up all those times and then put them together and what your rationale was behind that.
Mm-hmm. So it all comes back to how specific can we make this to her actually training like she's in a game. And if you we literally pulled up film and looked at I believe a women's national U.S. women's national game to see just kind of like what the average the gross pace of the game looked like, and it obviously wasn't them walking for 7 minutes or whatever at 3 miles an hour, and then as soon as 7 minutes is up they're jogging a little bit faster for 6 consecutive minutes. They're just back and forth between all kinds of different paces. It's pretty random. Um, basically, I tried to make it as specific or matched it like I could to an actual game, based on just soccer I've seen, and then the film, looking at actual film that we were talking about, and then just kind of paste it out from there. So when we're looking, let me pull up the actual program, but it starts out. I didn't looking at the film, they didn't start at like a dead sprint at that max intent. So they were kind of at, it looked to me grossly like at that speed zone where they're about 6 miles an hour. So I just took a chunk of, that speed zone allocation, or how much time we had, within the whole program to spend in that speed zone. And started out with a couple minutes running at 6 miles an hour, just because that's what it looked like they were doing on film. Um, so it starts out with 2 minutes jogging at about that 6 miles an hour, and then it slowly starts to ramp up. I wanted it to be random, but I also wanted there to be a little bit of like logic behind it on our part, just to keep her safe. Initially getting back into those levels of working, but still kind of mimic the demands of the sport. So the progressions on the speeds, it kind of, I already told you, it doesn't start out at a max speed, because that would be, if you aren't warmed up and you're just hopping on a treadmill right at 15 miles an hour, that could be asking for some trouble there. So we started out at 6 miles an hour, then it kind of progressed to the 9 miles an hour speed zone, and then up to the 13 miles an hour speed zone for a few hours. That's the 30 seconds. Then we dropped back down to 3 miles an hour. So I wanted it to kind of follow a bit of a progression of ramping up speed and then come back down. And then, once she was really warm and moving on the treadmill for, 4 or so minutes, then I could start getting real random with how I was throwing speeds in, because she was ready to go. And her legs were warm and not as high risk for, muscle strain or an injury or something at that point. So that's kind of the basics of it, starting at a not too demanding of a speed, let her warm up, and then from there you can get a little more random with the speeds, just mimicking the nature of a women's soccer game at a high level.
So go ahead and just list it out, right? So just be like, all right, so we did 6, or whatever, 2 minutes at this mile an hour, and just kind of list it out, the full program for 20 minutes.
Absolutely. So to start out, we're running at 2 minutes at a speed of 6 miles per hour. You could kind of correlate that on an intensity scale from 0 to 100% at about 40% is what I put it as. After that, from minutes 2 to minutes 4, the next couple minutes, you're at a speed of 9 miles an hour, which is about a 60% intent. Then from 4 minutes to 4 minutes and 30 seconds, we're at a speed of 13 miles an hour. So getting pretty high up there in intent, about 90%, and that's 30 seconds at it. After that, we come down to 3 miles an hour for minutes 4.5 to 6.5. Yep, and that's about 20% intent. 6 minutes 30 seconds to 6 minutes 40 seconds, we jump up all the way to a little portion of our max intent sprint at 15 miles an hour, so 100% intent. From 6 minutes 40 seconds to 9 minutes 40 seconds, we're at 6 miles an hour, which is about 40% intensity. 9 minutes 40 seconds to 11 minutes 40 seconds, we're at 9 miles an hour, 60% intensity. 11 minutes 40 seconds to 12 minutes and 10 seconds, so we're getting back up to 13 miles an hour, so another 30-second interval at 90% intensity there. 12 minutes 10 seconds to 15 minutes and 10 seconds, 3 miles an hour, which are jumping back down to only about 20% intensity. And then from 15 minutes and 10 seconds to 15 minutes, 20 seconds, that's the extreme jump from 3 miles an hour to 15 miles an hour. But notice how we're, what, 3/4 of the way through the workout and not right at the beginning of the workout. So it's a demanding task we're asking of her, but she's nice and warm and she's in the flow of the exercise. So less risk of re-injury or something else there. And then we're back down to 9 miles an hour from 15 minutes, 20 seconds to 16 minutes, 20 seconds, 60% intent. 16 minutes, 20 seconds to 18 minutes and 20 seconds. We're at 6 miles an hour. From 18 minutes and 20 seconds to 18 minutes and 30 seconds. It's our last 10-second bout of a high intensity sprint at 15 miles an hour. And then for the last 2 minutes or 1 minute and a half, from 18:30 to 20 minutes, she's all back down to 3 miles an hour. So kind of like a nice cool down that we worked back into it at the end. But I wanted to make sure, like with each progression, I was just peeling away at those chunks of times that we had allocated to each speed zone. And this was the draft that worked out. And yeah, and I tried it myself to make sure it wasn't anything too crazy, and I was able to get through it. So hopefully, um, that's one thing that I've kind of learned just throughout this rotation is making sure that lots of things that I'm having other, clients or people that I'm working with do, I've at least gone through myself. So I have an idea and, can actually give good advice with how to work through those safely. So yeah, that's how it came out.
What was give me some friction areas on this program. Like what was one of the harder things besides the exertion level, but just maybe implementation wise, what do you feel like were some of the things that were pretty cumbersome about it that need to be improved?
For developing the program, is that what you're talking
No,
about?
no, you did the program. So now that you've done the program, at least once, tell me what needs to be better about it right away.
Well, it's if you don't have a treadmill that can adjust quickly, like if it's slow to ramp up, then it's going to be really tough to go from 3 miles an hour to 15 miles an hour and for only 10 seconds to get that amount of work done. So for it to be realistic and applicable, we should have, it's nice to have a treadmill that can change speed quickly. And I believe with the client we were working with, she had access to that. So that was helpful to know and even allowed us to make an even more specific program for her. But for me, in my case, I was doing it at the Vasa Fitness, whose treadmills do not adjust quite nearly as fast. So that was one problem that I ran into, is being able to adjust the speed quickly enough, but also get enough time in each of those speed zones where I could, best prepare myself if I were to train or go play a soccer game or something. So that was a bit of a bump in the road. That was the main thing that came to mind. And then the walking at 3 miles an hour was kind of tough. So I don't know, like it's a slow walk. And I think the data, like I might've increased the treadmill to like 3.5 miles an hour, just a little bit, just so it'd be more realistic. I don't know. In my mind, 3 miles an hour just seems super slow. And it didn't seem like they were moving that slow on the field, but again, that's personal preference. So those were a couple areas, but mainly just the quick changes in speed was one of the main bumps to work through, and not having that equipment to be able to do it appropriately.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll be the first to say, like, this program is so new. I haven't even had a chance to try it out. Um, but one of the things I think we're going to run into an issue with already, and you've kind of provided a solution a little bit already, and that is, what if they don't have a treadmill at all? Right. And so, where are they going to do this? If they don't, they're going to end up running outside, maybe even on the soccer field itself or on a track or something like that. But then in that case, they're probably not going to have miles per hour as a way to gauge their speed to make sure that they're at those proper speeds. Now, that being said, you provided a nice little side note, and I know that's one of the questions we typically will get on this is like, well, hey, look, I don't have a treadmill that one can go that fast, or two, I just don't even have a treadmill. Um, how do I do this if I don't have one? And the answer is you gave percentages of effort, right? So you had a 90% effort for this amount of time. You had 100% for this amount of time, 40% and 60%. And when the study actually looked at that as well, and they kind of gauged that the players were reporting their percent efforts in a different scale, but they were reporting how hard they were having to move, or how hard they felt like they were going to move. So we have some data in regards to, hey, like you should feel like you're really, really pushing hard, but not as hard as you possibly can push, maybe during some of these time intervals. So that's one thing that I think we're going to run into an issue. Yeah, I was going to do this a couple nights ago. It just didn't work out, running in the dark. And then I figured out, hey, if I'm going to run in the dark, I'm going to run into a big problem here, is because I'm going to have to be looking at a paper in the dark to know how often and how long. We have so many transitions in this program. I think that's going to be a problem, unless they've got a coach that's standing there right there with them, like, hey, you're at this phase for 2 minutes. They're giving them a countdown. Maybe, hey, you got 5 to 10 seconds before your next change. We're going to be, bumping it up. But this is a very new program. I use the word novel, and I probably should just say it's brand new. And it's one of those things that I wanted to present it on while I still had John here during his internship. But it's something that I think as we go along, we're going to start using this more often. And I like it because it does incorporate more skill specific or more sport specific conditioning training, specifically geared towards a soccer athlete. And the study really allowed us to delve into that, and to get after it a little bit that way. The other thing in regards to this program, I can already see that we're going to end up changing a little bit, is the 20 minutes that we're using is totally arbitrary. It is quite literally the only time that our athlete really has to train. Now, that the 20 minutes of conditioning is in addition to her strength conditioning program, her corrective exercise program, her mobility program. It's in addition to her skills-based programming that she's already doing. It's her practice, and she's already scrimmaging now too. So she's getting live reps in regards to conditioning just through the scrimmaging. This conditioning program was not meant to just mimic or to replace her actually playing on the field. It was meant to augment it and improve it. And so this is in addition to everything else she's already doing. So we could actually decrease this time interval down, even down to 10 minutes, and change our times. But the good news is, the way John's built it out is that, hey, if we want to use this, we want to use this for a 30-minute time interval because our athlete really can't do much on a soccer field, but we want to work on our conditioning. Hey, we can take these percentages, boost up the numbers, and say, hey, look, yeah, you're going to be spending this much time at all of these intervals. So this is a very highly modifiable program for conditioning in regards to soccer. The other thing that I also want to make mention is, this is not, you look at it, is this is what the girls, or I should say the women in this college, in this D2 program, were doing. And so if we are trying to improve upon VO2 max or their ability in their conditioning, we're probably going to have to augment or change these numbers to try and push that VO2 max a little bit more. So in all honesty, I think that's going to look a lot like us decreasing that time from 0 to 3 miles per hour, and maybe making that a smaller percentage rather than a third of the time during their conditioning program. We may even shorten it down to 20%, or maybe even down to 15%, to try and really push their VO2 max up. So anyways, I thought those were kind of interesting things. Again, totally preliminary. I haven't done this program yet. John's right. We definitely need to do more repetitions on it. Our athlete is just starting on it, so there'll probably be some follow-up that will be needed there. We kind of thought the best case scenario for her, she has a manual treadmill at home that will be able to gauge speed. She can change at a moment's notice. It's indoors, and so she can do it anytime. So I think it's going to work best for her. So we really highly specified this program to her needs. And so we're going to see how it works and see what we need to change, and go from there. But I think this is one of those things, I think we're going to look back on this, and we're going to see that this is going to have a ripple effect years down the road of how we're doing conditioning specifically for our field athletes, soccer, even lacrosse, anything that would be close to soccer. If we don't have data like the soccer study did, then this is something that we'll probably use for a lot of different field sports that are out there. So, John, anything else you want to add in regards to the program? Little tips for the athletes that may want to try to incorporate this, or things that you think we'll see from this program?
No, I mean, there's a couple foundational concepts that you kind of just talked about, or just did talked about right there. And that's really, I mean, this was one of the, initial experiences of me as a new clinician, really diving into the research and pulling something concrete out that I could make, a program out of. So it was a great experience for me. And obviously a lot of like we already said, it's the early trials of it. It's going to take a lot of like some practice, us performing it on our part, and then also giving it to the athlete and having her perform it, and then get feedback directly from her and see kind of where she says, "Oh, this is spot on. I really like how this kind of matches," and we're completely off the mark. So it's a delicate balance of what the research says and what is feasible and makes sense to the athlete. Both time wise and also just like how she feels as an athlete that knows what the demands of the sport. So it kind of takes a lot of the feedback from her part, and then us realizing that evidence is, that's a great start, but we got to kind of mold as we go to make sure it meets her demands and ultimately prepares her for her best success. So, but yeah, it was a great exercise for me as a new clinician, and I enjoyed it. So thanks for the opportunity.
Well, we did a fantastic job. You really did. One of the things I wanted to point out for those that are listening is this is, and this may sound a little bit like we're a little self praise for John and I, but realistically, when we talk about coaching and getting good coaching and good training, and maybe not that I hate to say YouTube's inherently bad, as I know this video is going to be on YouTube, but if you've got this thing where you go on YouTube and you've got guys giving you conditioning programs, this is the difference between a good conditioning program, a good coaching, good training, and someone maybe is just throwing generic programs out there. And the reason why you'll hear me on the podcast always saying, look, if you want the best results, then you need to go and find someone who's a good trainer and knows what's going on and knows the demands, and is willing to dive into the research like this and to try and pull out the best practices we possibly can, because at that point you're not going to be wasting any time in trialing and erroring all these different programs, and you'll get to your result a lot faster. And obviously there's a little bit of self-promotion in regards to, that's what we do here at Athletic Potential, is trying to improve and get everybody to their goals as fast as we possibly can, as safely as we possibly can. But this is the difference. And John's done a fantastic job of pulling the research out and diving into the numbers, all those percentages, all of the miles per hour, all the times. None of that was in the research. He had to actually go in and do a bunch of math and figure it out. And so props to John for doing that for us. And it's something I definitely think we'll continue to use here at Athletic Potential. I'm sure he'll use at his other settings wherever he ends up. And John, I just want to say thanks. Really, for the last 12 weeks, you've done a great job. You've been a fantastic student. I've had a lot of students, that, and you've heard me say it. I've had everywhere from really, green and not so good students to quite good students. You definitely rank up there with one of the top students I've ever had. And to come into a setting like this and to be able to perform is tough. So I appreciate all the work you've done for us here at Athletic Potential, and you've been fantastic. And I wish you well, and wherever you end up, and hopefully you and I will keep communicating. And at some point, we'll definitely have you back on the podcast and do a little recap on a few things, and maybe even cover this conditioning program again, and just see what's happened, and over the months or years that we've been developing it. So I appreciate it, John. And anything else? Any farewell speech or anything like that? No pressure. You don't have to do it. I just was saying.
No, no, thank you very much for the opportunity. I mean, I alluded to it earlier, but like I've learned incredible amounts in this final rotation, and I've really developed a passion for it. And a lot of that comes down to having a great clinical instructor who can kind of show you the way throughout it all and really mentor you through the way. So thank you for taking me on and teaching me the ways, pointing, countless resources my way and allowing me to soak it up like a sponge the best I can. So, and just being patient with me through the learning process, and especially in an area where I didn't really know as much about baseball or throwing sports, but with your guidance and my effort along the way, I was able to kind of learn through stuff that I wasn't as familiar with, and really see how, as a new clinician, I can pick apart, areas of a sport or a movement that I'm not familiar with, and really learn how to coach people through it. So, but yeah, thank you, Mike, for having me and teaching me the ways.
Well, you've been fantastic. So I appreciate everybody tuning into the podcast and taking time to come out. If you do have a chance, go ahead and rate and review on Apple Podcasts or however you're listening to your podcast. Also, just tell your friends. Just remember that this podcast is predominantly a question-driven podcast, so please submit your questions. You can do that through Apple Podcasts. There's a link there. You can also go to the website. It's in the outro. Just go ahead and listen to that. We would definitely want to answer any questions you guys have and get good information out there. And I appreciate everybody taking the time to come here and to listen, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. Hey everybody, just want to say thank you for listening to the Athletic Potential Podcast. If you do have questions for the podcast, please visit the website www.athletic-potential.com/podcast. You'll find a button there to ask your question. Please input your information and your question, and we will answer any and all questions we get. And thank you again for listening. If you do get a chance, please rate and review the podcast. And until next time, thanks.